What if the real reason for the Iraq War was buried beneath ancient sands? A secret older than civilization itself. Tonight we explore a story connecting ancient mythology to modern warfare. A discovery that vanished into silence. Gilgamesh. This name echoes through clay tablets thousands of years old. King of Uruk, 2/3 God, 1/3 man. In April 2003, weeks before bombs fell on Baghdad, archaeologists announced they had found his tomb beneath a river. Then the war began. The site was sealed. The scientists went silent, and the world forgot what had been discovered. Coincidence? Or was the timing deliberate? Why did the invasion begin at the exact moment the tomb was found? Tonight we follow this thread through ancient tablets and modern secrets, through myths and classified operations. Let your breathing slow. The night is long. This story has waited 5,000 years to be told properly. Not everything written in history books is true, and not every war is fought for the reasons we are given. Sometimes the deepest truths lie buried, under sand, under secrecy, under thousands of years of silence. Some say they found technology in that tomb. Some say they found something that could change human history. This is a story of Gilgamesh's tomb and the mystery of April 2003, a tale of ancient kings and modern wars. Let the journey begin. In the spring of 2003, a team of German archaeologists was working in southern Iraq with technology that could see through the earth itself. They used magnetometry, a scanning method that detects buried structures without digging. For months they had been mapping the region around ancient Uruk, one of the first cities humanity ever built. They were finding walls, buildings, and passages that had been hidden for thousands of years. But in April, they found something that would change everything. The technology had never been applied to this region at such scale before, making every reading a potential revelation of structures hidden for millennia. The scans revealed a massive structure beneath the ancient riverbed of the Euphrates, not a random ruin. An organized complex with chambers, walls, and corridors arranged with deliberate precision. The location matched exactly what the ancient texts described. According to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the legendary king was buried beneath the river. The people of Uruk diverted the water to build his tomb, then returned the flow to hide it forever. For centuries, scholars thought this was poetic exaggeration. Now they were staring at evidence it might be literally true. The BBC covered the story. International newspapers ran headlines about the potential discovery of Gilgamesh's actual burial site. The archaeological world was electrified with possibility. This could be one of the most significant finds in history, rivaling Tutankhamun's tomb in importance. The German team prepared for careful excavation. They had the equipment, the expertise, the permissions. Everything was ready for a discovery that could rewrite what we know about ancient civilization. Years of previous work in the region had prepared them to understand the significance of the anomalies their equipment was detecting. But they never got the chance to dig. Within weeks of the announcement, the political situation in Iraq reached its breaking point. The United States and Britain launched their invasion. Bombs began falling on Baghdad. The German team evacuated immediately, leaving their equipment behind. The site they had discovered was left unprotected, unmarked, and forgotten in the chaos of war. What should have been a moment of historical revelation became a footnote lost in the noise of conflict. The team's decades of experience in ancient Near Eastern sites gave them unique perspective on what the readings might represent. The timing haunts those who noticed it. The discovery was announced in early April. The invasion began on March 20th. The war had been building for months, justified by claims of weapons of mass destruction, but those weapons were never found. The official reasons for the invasion eventually collapsed under scrutiny. So why that moment? Why that place? Why did the most powerful military force on Earth descend on the exact region where archaeologists had just announced they found something extraordinary? Some call it coincidence. Wars have timelines driven by politics, logistics, and diplomacy. Archaeological discoveries have nothing to do with military planning. The two events happen to overlap by chance, nothing more. This is the reasonable explanation, the one that requires no hidden agendas or secret knowledge. It is probably correct. But it leaves questions unanswered that continue to trouble those who look closely at what happened in those chaotic weeks. The synchronicity of these events would generate questions that official explanations never quite managed to settle completely. Others see a pattern too precise to be accidental. They note that certain archaeological sites in southern Iraq were secured by American forces with unusual speed. Not military targets, not oil facilities, ancient ruins. They note that the Iraqi National Museum in Baghdad was looted in the first days of occupation while soldiers watched nearby. They note that some of the stolen items were stored in locations known only to senior staff. The looters knew exactly where to go. The efficiency of the theft suggested preparation and coordination far beyond what desperate opportunism could explain. The story of Gilgamesh's tomb disappeared from the news within days. The chaos of war provided endless other stories: battles, politics, terrorism, reconstruction. No one had time to ask what happened to the German discovery. No one followed up on what lay beneath that ancient riverbed. The site has never been properly excavated. Whatever is down there remains hidden, waiting. Unless someone reached it first, in the confusion of those early days, and took what they found. This intersection of discovery and destruction would fuel speculation for decades among those who paid attention to both. This is where conspiracy theories begin to grow, not from nothing, but from the gaps in official explanations, from the strange coincidences that accumulate when you look closely, from the silence of scientists who made the discovery and never spoke publicly about it again, from the questions that no one in authority seems willing to answer. The space between what we know and what we suspect is where this story lives. The persistence of such beliefs reflects something deep in human psychology, a need to find meaning and intention behind events that might otherwise seem random. To understand why any of this matters, we need to understand who Gilgamesh was. Not just the legend, but why his tomb would be worth hiding, why his burial might contain something that powerful forces would want to control. The answer lies in the oldest story ever written, inscribed on clay tablets before the pyramids were built. A story about a king who was not entirely human, and what he learned when he went searching for the secret of eternal life. The clay tablets that held these stories had endured countless centuries, only to confront dangers their creators never anticipated. But first, consider what was lost in those chaotic weeks. The Iraqi National Museum housed one of the richest archaeological collections in the world. Artifacts from civilizations that invented writing, mathematics, astronomy, and law. Treasures that belonged to all humanity, evidence of our shared origins. In the first days of the occupation, approximately 15,000 pieces vanished. Some were recovered. Thousands never were. And some that came back turned out to be copies. Someone had switched them. The pattern of theft was not random. Professional criminals targeted specific items of academic rather than aesthetic value. Untranslated tablets containing text we may never recover. Objects stored in secret locations that ordinary looters could not have known about. This was not opportunistic chaos. This was targeted acquisition by people who knew exactly what they wanted. The question that haunts researchers is simple. Who sent them, and what were they really looking for? What fire had preserved through accident modern conflict now threatened through a different kind of destruction? Gilgamesh was king of Uruk approximately 47 centuries ago, making him one of the earliest rulers we know by name. But according to the ancient texts, he was not entirely human. The tablets describe him as 2/3 God and 1/3 man, born of a divine mother and a mortal father. He was impossibly tall, impossibly strong, and possessed knowledge that ordinary humans could never achieve. Whether this description is metaphor or something more literal is a question that divides researchers to this day. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest written story in human history, predating Homer by more than 1,000 years. It tells how this king ruled Uruk with absolute power, until the gods created a companion to humble him. This companion, Enkidu, was formed from clay and brought to life in the wilderness. When Enkidu came to Uruk, he and Gilgamesh fought. But the battle ended in friendship, and the two became inseparable brothers in spirit, embarking on adventures that would become legend. Documents that outlasted empires and religions found themselves suddenly vulnerable to forces their authors could never have imagined. Together, they traveled to the cedar forest and killed the monster Humbaba, who guarded it. Together, they slew the bull of heaven that the goddess Ishtar sent against Uruk when Gilgamesh rejected her offer of marriage. They were invincible together, feared by gods and mortals alike. But the gods do not tolerate mortals who grow too powerful. As punishment for their deeds, they decreed that Enkidu must die. Gilgamesh watched his brother waste away from a divine illness, powerless to save him. These matters reach toward fundamental questions about human nature and our place in the larger story of existence. The death of Enkidu shattered Gilgamesh completely. For the first time, the great king understood that he, too, would die. The terror of mortality consumed him. He could not accept that all his power, all his achievements, would end in darkness and dust. He decided to seek the secret of eternal life that the gods kept for themselves. He would find Utnapishtim, the only human ever granted immortality, and learn how to escape death forever. The era he ruled witnessed transformations in human organization that would shape all subsequent civilization. The journey took Gilgamesh to the edge of the world. He crossed mountains guarded by scorpion beings whose very presence killed ordinary men. He walked through absolute darkness for 12 hours, a passage that some researchers believe describes something more technological than magical. He reached the Garden of the Gods, a paradise at the end of the earth. There he found Utnapishtim, the ancient survivor of a great flood, living in eternal life with his wife. The desire to transcend death connects all human beings across time and space in ways that cultural differences cannot erase. Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh the story of the flood, how the gods decided to destroy humanity, how one god secretly warned him to build a vessel and fill it with his family, craftsmen, and animals of every kind, how the storm raged for 6 days and 7 nights before the waters receded and the boat came to rest on a mountain. This story, written centuries before the Bible existed, contains remarkable parallels to the later account of Noah. The connection between these narratives remains debated by scholars. The immortal survivor offered Gilgamesh a test. Stay awake for 7 nights, and perhaps he might be worthy of eternal life. But Gilgamesh failed. Exhausted from his journey, he slept. When he woke, he was devastated. But Utnapishtim's wife convinced her husband to offer the king something. There was a plant at the bottom of the sea, they said. Eating it would restore youth and vitality. It was not true immortality, but it was something. Gilgamesh dove into the depths and retrieved the precious plant. This ancient narrative continues to resonate across the ages. On the long journey home, Gilgamesh stopped to bathe in a cool pool. While he was distracted, a serpent emerged and ate the plant. The snake shed its skin and became young again while the king watched helplessly. Everything he had sought, everything he had suffered to find, was gone in an instant. He wept bitterly at the shore, mourning not just the plant, but the hope it represented. He would die like all mortals. There was no escape from the fate that awaits every living thing. During his time, the innovations that define urban society were being developed and refined for the first time. But the story does not end in despair. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk, a changed man. He understood at last that true immortality lies not in the body, but in the legacy one leaves behind. He built the Great Wall of Uruk, one of the wonders of the ancient world. He had his story inscribed on tablets so it would survive the ages. He ruled with wisdom gained through suffering. And when he finally died, he was buried with honors befitting a king who was half divine. The irony of survival through ancient catastrophe, followed by loss through modern chaos, was not lost on scholars who understood what was at stake. According to the tablets, Gilgamesh was laid to rest beneath the river. The people of Uruk diverted the Euphrates to build his tomb in the dry riverbed, then restored the flow to conceal it forever. This was not ordinary burial. This was hiding something precious, protecting something important, ensuring that whatever was buried with the king would remain undisturbed through the ages. For nearly 5,000 years, it worked, until April 2003, when German scientists pointed their instruments at the Earth and saw what lay beneath. To understand why some believe Gilgamesh's tomb could contain more than the bones of an ancient king, we need to explore a controversial interpretation of Sumerian texts. The tablets speak constantly of beings called the Anunnaki, typically translated as gods or divine beings. They descended from heaven, taught humanity civilization, and eventually withdrew from direct contact. Mainstream scholars treat these accounts as mythology, expressions of religious belief rather than historical record. But not everyone agrees with this interpretation. Zacharias Sitchin, a researcher who spent decades studying Sumerian texts, proposed a radical alternative. He argued that the Anunnaki were not gods in the spiritual sense, but extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth from another planet he called Nibiru. According to his translations, they arrived hundreds of thousands of years ago to mine gold for purposes related to their home world. Finding the labor too demanding, they genetically engineered a worker species by combining their DNA with that of existing primates. That species was humanity. Academic linguists have heavily criticized Sitchin's translations, pointing to what they consider fundamental errors in his understanding of Sumerian grammar and vocabulary. Mainstream science rejects his conclusions entirely. But his books have sold millions of copies, and his ideas have spawned an entire genre of ancient astronaut literature and television programming. Millions of people around the world believe some version of his thesis, convinced that human origins are far stranger than conventional history teaches. If Sitchin's interpretation is even partially correct, it transforms what Gilgamesh's tomb might contain. The king was described as two-thirds divine, meaning he would have had substantial Anunnaki genetics. He spent his life seeking the secret of eternal life that the Anunnaki possessed, but humans did not. His journey took him to meet Utnapishtim, who was granted immortality by the Anunnaki after the flood. Whatever Gilgamesh learned on that journey, whatever he brought back or was buried with, could be evidence of a connection between humanity and beings from beyond Earth. Some proponents of these theories go further still. They claim that Uruk contains not just tombs and temples, but stargates, portals that allow travel between worlds. The Anunnaki supposedly used these devices to come and go from Earth throughout history. According to this view, the Iraq War was fought not primarily for oil or to remove Saddam Hussein, but to gain control of ancient technology that could shift the global balance of power. Whoever controls the stargates controls access to knowledge and capabilities beyond current human science. There is no verified evidence for stargates or Anunnaki DNA or extraterrestrial intervention in human origins. These remain theories, believed by some and dismissed by others. But the theories persist because they fill gaps that mainstream explanations leave open. Why did civilization emerge so suddenly in Mesopotamia? How did the Sumerians know about planets that were not observed until modern times? Why do creation myths from cultures around the world share such remarkable similarities? These questions have conventional answers, but those answers do not satisfy everyone. Saddam Hussein himself was fascinated by ancient Mesopotamian history in ways that some find suggestive. He built palaces in Babylonian style and inscribed his name on bricks alongside Nebuchadnezzar, the ancient king who conquered Jerusalem. He invested heavily in archaeological projects and restoration of ancient sites. Some researchers suggest he may have had access to information about hidden sites and artifacts that he refused to share with Western powers. Whether this contributed to making him a target is impossible to prove, but frequently speculated. The absence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, despite years of insistence that they existed, has fueled suspicion about the real reasons for the invasion. If the stated justification was wrong or deliberately false, what was the true motivation? Oil is one obvious answer. Geopolitical positioning is another. But for those inclined toward alternative explanations, the timing of the invasion just after the tomb discovery suggests a third possibility. Perhaps multiple agendas were being served simultaneously. We should be careful here. Conspiracy theories are seductive precisely because they offer clear explanations for confusing events. They provide the comfort of believing someone is in control, even if that someone has sinister motives. The world may simply be more chaotic and coincidental than we want to believe. The tomb discovery and the invasion may be unrelated events that happen to overlap in time. The looting of the museum may have been opportunistic crime rather than targeted operation. The targeted nature of the losses implied intelligence and organization that random looting could not account for. But we should also be careful not to dismiss questions simply because they are uncomfortable. Governments do keep secrets. Powerful institutions do pursue hidden agendas. Historical events are sometimes driven by factors the public is never told about. The truth about Iraq, about what was found and what was taken, may not emerge for decades, if it emerges at all. Until then, the questions remain, circling around gaps in the official story that have never been adequately filled. The absence of disclosure creates space for speculation to grow in directions that transparency would foreclose. Let us examine what we actually know, separating verified facts from speculation. The German archaeological team did exist. Their magnetometry survey did detect structures beneath the ancient riverbed near Uruk. The BBC and other credible outlets did report on the discovery. The invasion did begin shortly afterward. The Iraqi National Museum was looted in the first days of occupation. These facts are not disputed by anyone. What remains disputed is whether they are connected, and what that connection might mean. The museum looting has been studied extensively by investigators trying to understand what happened. The initial estimates of loss were catastrophically high, with some reports suggesting over 170,000 items stolen. Later assessments reduced this number significantly to approximately 15,000 objects missing. Many were eventually recovered through various channels. But thousands remain unaccounted for, their current locations unknown. The discrepancy between initial reports and later figures itself became a point of controversy. What troubled investigators was the pattern of theft. Some looters were clearly opportunistic, grabbing whatever they could carry. But others demonstrated detailed knowledge of the collection. They knew which storage rooms contained which objects. They had tools for opening sealed cases. They targeted items of scholarly rather than commercial value, pieces that would be difficult to sell, but crucial for understanding ancient texts. This suggested coordination, planning, and inside information. What this reveals touches on mysteries that extend far beyond any single event or discovery. Testimonies from people who were in Iraq during the invasion have added layers to the mystery, though none provide definitive answers. American soldiers have described being assigned to guard archaeological sites without understanding why. They report seeing unmarked vehicles arrive at night, boxes being removed, aircraft departing with unknown cargo. These accounts cannot be verified, and some may be false or exaggerated. But they circulate in communities interested in these questions, adding to the accumulated uncertainty. Iraqi scientists and museum staff who survived the invasion tell their own stories, often reluctantly. Several fled the country and have been cautious about discussing what they witnessed. Some have died under circumstances that have never been fully explained. One scientist, in a rare interview before his death, said only that things were seen that should not have been seen, and things were taken that should not have been taken. He would not elaborate on what he meant. The convergence of archaeological breakthrough and military action left questions that time has not resolved. The German team that made the original discovery has largely remained silent on the subject. They have not returned to the site. They have not published detailed findings from their survey. Whether this silence reflects professional caution, legal constraints, or pressure from other sources is unknown. Their instruments could tell us what lies beneath that riverbed with far more precision than speculation allows. But those instruments have not been pointed at that ground since 2003. Their deep familiarity with Sumerian architecture allowed them to interpret the magnetometry results with unusual confidence. The site itself remains unexcavated. Years of instability in Iraq have made proper archaeological work impossible in much of the country. Security concerns, lack of funding, and political chaos have all contributed to the neglect of cultural heritage that should be protected. The supposed tomb of Gilgamesh is one of many sites that deserve investigation, but cannot receive it. Each year that passes without excavation is another year of decay, another year when whatever is down there may be degrading beyond recovery. The archaeological significance of these finds cannot be overstated by those who understand what proper investigation might reveal about our distant ancestors. Meanwhile, the antiquities trade continues to operate in shadows. Iraqi artifacts appear periodically on international markets, their provenance obscured by decades of chaos and multiple transfers of ownership. Collectors pay premium prices for Mesopotamian pieces, creating incentives that perpetuate the looting of sites across the country. The line between legal acquisition and traffic in stolen goods is often deliberately blurred. Museums and private collectors prefer not to ask questions that might have uncomfortable answers. The broader pattern of cultural destruction in Iraq and the region continues to this day. ISIS demolished ancient sites deliberately, filming their vandalism as propaganda. Civil wars in Syria have devastated archaeological zones that had survived millennia. Climate change threatens sites with rising temperatures and changing water patterns. The accumulated heritage of the cradle of civilization is eroding from multiple directions simultaneously. What we lose cannot be recovered. The overlap between scientific revelation and political violence created a puzzle that continues to attract attention. Against this backdrop of loss and uncertainty, the story of Gilgamesh's tomb remains suspended, neither proven nor disproven, neither excavated nor forgotten. A mystery that the passage of time makes harder rather than easier to solve. Perhaps someday conditions will permit proper investigation. Perhaps we will learn what the German team found beneath that river, what secrets the ancient king was buried with, whether there is any truth to the theories that swirl around the subject. Perhaps, but not yet. Beyond the specific questions about tombs and looting, this story touches on something deeper about how we understand history and the forces that shape it. We are taught that history moves through known causes: economics, politics, ideology, the decisions of leaders responding to circumstances they understand. But what if there are layers beneath this surface? What if some events are driven by knowledge that only a few possess, pursued for reasons the public is never told? These inquiries merit thoughtful engagement rather than reflexive rejection, as important truths sometimes emerge from challenging assumptions. The idea that elites possess hidden knowledge is ancient and persistent. Mystery religions in the ancient world promised initiates access to secrets that transformed their understanding of existence. Gnostic traditions taught that true knowledge was available only to those properly prepared to receive it. Secret societies throughout history have claimed to preserve wisdom passed down from antiquity. Whether any of this is true or merely human psychological need projected onto the universe is a question each person must answer for themselves. What makes the Iraq situation unusual is the convergence of ancient mystery and modern power. If there were nothing worth hiding in Mesopotamia, why the strange patterns surrounding the invasion? If the tomb discovery was insignificant, why was it never followed up? If the museum looting was random chaos, why the evidence of coordination? These questions do not prove conspiracy. They simply indicate that the official narrative has gaps, and gaps invite those who are suspicious to fill them with their own explanations. The psychological appeal of conspiracy theories is well documented. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures who find meaninglessness disturbing. We prefer to believe someone is in control, even if their control is malevolent, rather than accept that events are random and chaotic. Conspiracy theories offer the comfort of believing the world makes sense, that nothing happens by accident, that hidden purposes connect events that seem unrelated. This appeal does not make the theories true, but it explains why they persist. At the same time, dismissing all conspiracy theories as psychological projection ignores documented history. Governments have conducted secret experiments on their own citizens. Intelligence agencies have overthrown democratically elected leaders. Corporations have suppressed research showing their products cause harm. Official lies have led nations to war. The gap between what authorities say publicly and what they do privately is often vast. Skepticism toward official narratives is sometimes warranted. The truth about Gilgamesh's tomb probably lies somewhere between the extremes. The ancient king existed. His burial site may well be where the German team detected structures beneath the river. The tomb may contain extraordinary artifacts from a civilization that achieved things we do not fully understand. None of this requires extraterrestrials or stargates or secret government programs to acquire ancient technology. It simply requires that ancient Mesopotamia was more advanced than we sometimes recognize. But the timing of the discovery and the invasion may be nothing more than coincidence. The looting may reflect ordinary greed and chaos rather than targeted acquisition. The silence of scientists may stem from professional caution rather than suppression. The gaps in the story may result from imperfect information rather than deliberate concealment. We may be reading patterns into noise, finding connections that exist only in our desire for explanation. The parallel timing of knowledge gained and chaos unleashed remains a focal point for those who sense hidden connections. The implications deserve careful consideration by all who encounter them. What remains certain is uncertainty itself. We do not know what lies beneath that ancient riverbed. We do not know what was taken from Iraq in those chaotic days and where it went. We do not know why certain decisions were made or what information guided them. Until the site is properly excavated and the classified documents are released and the silent witnesses speak, the mystery will continue. And mysteries, by their nature, attract those who prefer questions to the unsatisfying answers authority provides. The Iraqi National Museum in Baghdad was not merely a repository of artifacts. It was the memory of human civilization itself, housed in a building that had stood since the 1960s. Within its walls rested objects that documented the invention of writing, the birth of mathematics, the first legal codes, the earliest astronomical observations. Cylinder seals from merchants who conducted business 4,000 years ago. Tablets recording the names of kings whose cities now lie beneath the sand. Golden helmets, intricate jewelry, stone carvings of beings that might have been gods or might have been something else entirely. To lose this collection would be to lose a part of our collective human soul. When the invasion began in March 2003, museum staff made desperate preparations. They moved the most valuable objects to secret storage locations, hiding them in vaults and basements that only senior personnel knew about. They sandbagged doorways and locked display cases. They hoped the fighting would bypass their building, that whatever chaos engulfed Baghdad would spare this one irreplaceable place. For a few days, their hopes seemed justified. The museum stood undamaged while battles raged elsewhere in the city. Then April arrived, and everything changed. The looting began on April 10th and continued for approximately 3 days. Staff members who tried to intervene were threatened or ignored. American forces were nearby, but did not act to stop the theft. When journalists arrived to document the destruction, they found smashed display cases, scattered objects, and shell-shocked curators surveying the damage to their life's work. The initial estimates were catastrophic. Over 170,000 pieces feared stolen. Later assessments revised this number downward, but thousands of objects were genuinely gone forever. What troubled investigators most was not the quantity of theft, but its quality. Some looters had grabbed whatever they could reach, leaving behind a mess of broken glass and discarded objects deemed not valuable enough to carry. But others had worked with surgical precision. They knew which storage rooms contained which categories of artifacts. They had tools for opening secured cases. They targeted objects that scholars had not yet fully studied, pieces whose significance would only be understood after their loss. This was not random chaos. The recovery effort began almost immediately and continues to this day. Interpol issued alerts. Customs agencies worldwide watched for suspicious shipments. Some objects appeared on international markets and were seized. Others were returned through diplomatic channels or recovered in raids on collectors. By some estimates, more than half of the stolen items have been recovered, but the remainder has vanished into private hands, basement vaults, and the shadows of the antiquities underworld. They may never resurface. Among the items that disappeared were tablets containing texts that had never been fully translated, cuneiform inscriptions that might have answered questions about Sumerian religion, astronomy, or daily life. Some of these tablets dated to periods for which very few written records survive. Their loss created gaps in human knowledge that may never be filled. What stories did they tell? What secrets did they preserve? We will never know because someone decided those secrets should remain hidden from public view. The failure to protect the museum became a scandal that demanded explanation. Congressional hearings were held. Military officers were questioned. The answers provided were never fully satisfying. Resources were limited. The security situation was chaotic. Protecting Iraqi lives took priority over protecting Iraqi heritage. These explanations may have been true, but they did not explain why the oil ministry was secured immediately, while the museum was left vulnerable. Priorities were clearly being set, and heritage was not among them. In the years since, the museum has been partially restored. Some galleries have reopened. New security measures have been implemented. But the trauma of those days remains visible in the gaps where objects once stood, in the empty cases awaiting returns that may never come, in the faces of staff who witnessed the destruction of everything they had dedicated their careers to preserving. The museum survives, but it is wounded, and the wounds tell a story that official explanations have never fully addressed. The structure detected beneath the ancient riverbed remains unexcavated to this day. 20 years have passed since the German team made their announcement, and no one has conducted the systematic investigation that proper archaeology requires. The site lies in territory that has seen continuous instability, invasion, occupation, insurgency, sectarian violence, the rise and fall of the Islamic State. Conditions that make careful scientific work impossible have persisted year after year, while whatever lies below slowly degrades beyond recovery. What the magnetometry revealed was a complex of chambers and corridors arranged with deliberate organization. The pattern matched descriptions in the Epic of Gilgamesh of how the king's tomb was constructed. A grand space beneath the diverted river, sealed when the waters were allowed to return. The ancient Sumerians possessed engineering capabilities that continue to surprise modern researchers. Diverting a major river temporarily to construct an underground monument would have required enormous resources, but it was not beyond their demonstrated abilities. If the structure is indeed Gilgamesh's tomb, what might it contain? Royal burials from ancient Mesopotamia have yielded extraordinary finds in the past. The royal tombs of excavated in the 1920s, revealed mass burials where servants followed their rulers into death, accompanied by golden artifacts, musical instruments, and objects of stunning craftsmanship. A burial for a king described as 2/3 divine might exceed even these precedents in splendor and significance. Royal burials from this era often included extraordinary wealth and objects designed to accompany the deceased into whatever afterlife awaited, ensuring their power and status continued beyond death. But the more intriguing question concerns objects of a different kind. Gilgamesh spent his life seeking the secret of immortality. He traveled to the edge of the world and learned from beings who possessed knowledge humans did not share. The texts are vague about what exactly he brought back from this journey, other than the plant that was stolen by the serpent. Did he return with other items? Did he acquire artifacts or texts that were buried with him? The tomb might contain evidence of technologies or knowledge that would challenge our understanding of what ancient peoples could achieve. Such speculation fuels the theories of those who believe the tomb was deliberately kept hidden. If powerful interests knew or suspected what the burial contained, they would have strong reasons to ensure it was never properly excavated and documented. Much better to reach it quietly, remove whatever was significant, and let the sand and silence preserve the mystery. Without excavation, nothing can be proven. Without proof, anything can be denied. The incentive to control rather than reveal such discoveries would be overwhelming for those who understand what monopoly over advanced knowledge could mean for global power dynamics. The riverbed itself has changed course multiple times over the millennia. What was once the Euphrates now flows in a different channel. The land that Gilgamesh knew has been transformed by thousands of years of human activity and natural processes. Finding the exact location of the detected structure would require reconciling ancient geography with modern surveys. The German team apparently accomplished this reconciliation, but their detailed findings have never been published for other researchers to verify and expand upon. Each passing year adds weight to the accumulated mystery, while reducing the chances that definitive answers will ever emerge from official channels. Some have suggested that the structure might not be a tomb at all. It could be a temple, a palace, or some other significant building from the ancient city. Uruk, at its height, was one of the largest cities in the world, covering hundreds of hectares with monumental architecture. Many structures remain buried and unexamined. What the instruments detected might be important without being specifically connected to Gilgamesh. Only excavation could determine what lies beneath and what significance it holds. Until that excavation occurs, the mystery persists. The German instruments may have glimpsed something extraordinary beneath the ancient riverbed, or they may have found another anonymous ruin in a region full of such remains. The connection to Gilgamesh may be accurate, or it may be wishful projection of legend onto ambiguous data. We do not know. We cannot know without digging. And no one is digging. The structure waits in darkness, as it has waited for 5,000 years, keeping whatever secrets it holds. Gilgamesh is not the only ancient figure described as part divine and part human. Across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, similar stories emerge. Demigods, god-kings, divine rulers who served as bridges between heaven and earth. The Greek heroes were often born of unions between gods and mortals. Egyptian pharaohs were considered living gods incarnate. Chinese emperors ruled by the mandate of heaven. This pattern is so universal that it demands explanation beyond coincidence. This remarkable consistency across civilizations that had no contact with each other suggests either common psychological needs finding similar expression, or common experiences being remembered in parallel ways. The conventional explanation treats these claims as propaganda. Rulers enhance their authority by asserting divine ancestry. People accepted such claims because they explained the obvious differences between those who held power and those who served them. If the king was part god, then his authority was natural and questioning it was blasphemy. Religion and politics merged to create stable hierarchies that organized ancient societies. The divine king was a useful fiction that served social purposes. But those who take ancient texts more literally see a different pattern. They see consistent descriptions across unconnected cultures of beings who descended from the sky, possessed advanced capabilities, and interbred with humans to produce hybrid lineages. The similarities are too specific to be explained by coincidence or independent invention. These researchers suggest that a common experience underlies the diverse mythologies, an actual historical contact with non-human intelligences that different cultures remembered in their own ways. The flood narratives present a similar pattern. The Sumerian account in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Hebrew account in Genesis. Similar stories from Greek mythology, Hindu tradition, Native American cultures, and countless other sources. The details vary, but the core narrative is remarkably consistent. The gods, or divine powers, decided to destroy humanity. One righteous person was warned and saved through building a vessel. This survivor became the ancestor of renewed humanity. The distribution of this story across cultures demands explanation. Geologists have documented evidence of catastrophic flooding events at various points in prehistory. Rising sea levels after the last ice age would have inundated coastal settlements worldwide. The breaking of glacial dams released walls of water across continents. A meteor impact in the ocean could have generated tsunamis of unimaginable scale. Any of these events could have provided the historical kernel around which flood myths crystallized. The stories might be cultural memories of actual catastrophes. What makes the Mesopotamian versions significant is their age and detail. The Sumerian texts are the oldest written sources we have for these narratives. When the Hebrew scribes composed Genesis, the stories of Utnapishtim had already been ancient for 1,000 years. This antiquity suggests that Mesopotamia was either the source from which other cultures borrowed, or the place where the oldest memories were first committed to writing. Either way, the tablets from this region deserve special attention. The Anunnaki appear in these texts as the powers behind the flood decision. They debated whether to destroy humanity. One of their number, Enki, defied the consensus to warn Utnapishtim. After the waters receded, the Anunnaki granted the survivor immortality as acknowledgement of his service. This narrative presents the divine powers not as abstract cosmic forces, but as beings with personalities, conflicts, and changing judgments. They argue with each other, they make mistakes, they change their minds. They seem almost human. For mainstream scholars, this anthropomorphism is precisely what mythology does. It projects human characteristics onto divine concepts to make them comprehensible. For alternative researchers, the human-like behavior of the Anunnaki is evidence that these beings were not concepts at all, but actual entities whose real characteristics the texts preserve. The debate continues without resolution, each side certain the other fundamentally misunderstands what the ancient scribes were trying to tell us. Archaeology has always had a complicated relationship with secrecy. The 19th century explorers who excavated Mesopotamian sites often worked under conditions that would horrify modern professionals. They dug hastily, kept inadequate records, and shipped crates of artifacts back to European museums without fully documenting what they contained. Knowledge was lost in the process of acquisition. What was found was never fully disclosed. The pattern of incomplete revelation began early and has never entirely ended. Modern archaeology operates under strict professional standards that emphasize documentation, publication, and peer review. Discoveries are supposed to be shared with the scholarly community and eventually with the public. Sites are supposed to be protected for future investigation with techniques not yet developed. But these standards apply only to legitimate archaeological operations. What happens when governments or private interests conduct excavations outside these norms? What happens when discoveries are made that those in power prefer to keep hidden? Rumors of secret excavations persist in alternative research communities. They speak of operations conducted by intelligence agencies rather than academic institutions. Teams that arrive by helicopter, work at night, and leave before local authorities can document their presence. Objects removed without inventory or provenance. Tunnels dug beneath ancient monuments in search of chambers that official archaeology denies exist. Whether any of these rumors contain truth is impossible to determine from outside the classified world. The existence of classified archaeological programs cannot be entirely dismissed, however. Governments routinely classify information related to sensitive technologies, and some ancient sites may contain such information. Egypt has long been suspected of concealing discoveries beneath the Giza Plateau that challenge conventional chronologies. Peru's government restricts access to certain sites in ways that exceed normal conservation concerns. Iraq, with its long history of foreign interest and military occupation, would be an obvious target for secret operations. The Vatican archives contain documents related to archaeological discoveries that remain sealed from public view. The Smithsonian Institution has been accused of suppressing finds that contradict accepted narratives of American prehistory. Whether these accusations have merit or merely reflect suspicion of powerful institutions is debated endlessly. The pattern is clear, however. Large organizations that control access to knowledge have repeatedly been suspected of controlling that access for reasons beyond pure scholarship. For those who believe that ancient civilizations possessed advanced knowledge, secrecy makes strategic sense. Whoever controls access to such knowledge controls its applications. Technologies derived from ancient sources might provide military advantages, economic opportunities, or power over populations who remain ignorant. The incentive to monopolize such discoveries rather than share them would be overwhelming. Transparency would defeat the very purpose of acquisition. Knowledge has always been power, and the most powerful knowledge would be guarded most jealously by those who possessed it and understood what it could do. Skeptics argue that large-scale secrecy is nearly impossible to maintain. Too many people would have to be involved. Whistleblowers would emerge. Documents would leak. The fact that no definitive evidence of secret archaeological programs has surfaced proves they do not exist. What circulates in conspiracy communities are rumors, misinterpretations, and outright fabrications dressed up as insider testimony. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and such evidence has not been produced. The debate cannot be settled with available information. We know that governments keep secrets. We know that powerful institutions have interests that extend beyond public benefit. We know that the Iraq War produced classified information that remains hidden decades later. Whether any of this classified material relates to archaeological discoveries is unknown. The absence of disclosure might indicate nothing worth hiding, or it might indicate effective concealment. Without access, we cannot determine which interpretation is correct. Whatever the truth about his tomb, whatever technologies he may or may not have been buried with, Gilgamesh left humanity something undeniably real. The oldest story we have. The epic that bears his name has survived for nearly 5,000 years, longer than any other narrative. It was ancient when Homer composed the Iliad. It was already legend when the first pharaohs built their pyramids. Through every transformation of human civilization, this story has endured because it speaks to something permanent in what we are. The epic is fundamentally about mortality and meaning. Gilgamesh begins as a tyrant, using his power without wisdom or restraint. He learns humility through friendship with Enkidu, a wild man who becomes his brother. He learns grief when Enkidu dies, and terror when he confronts his own mortality. He learns courage when he undertakes the impossible journey to the edge of the world, and he learns wisdom when he returns home empty-handed, but transformed. The arc of his story is the arc of human maturation. The search for immortality that drives the narrative has never lost its relevance. Every generation has sought to escape death through one means or another. Religion offers eternal life in spiritual realms. Medicine seeks to extend biological existence indefinitely. Technology promises digital consciousness that might outlast the flesh. The dream that animated Gilgamesh 5,000 years ago still animates us today. His failure is our failure, repeated endlessly across time. The specific forms may change with each generation, but the underlying desire remains constant: to escape the finality that awaits all biological existence. But the epic does not end in failure. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk and sees its walls with new eyes. He understands that what endures is not the individual, but what the individual creates. The walls he built will outlast him. The story he inscribed on tablets will outlast the walls. Something of him will survive into ages he cannot imagine, including this present moment when we speak his name and remember his journey. In this sense, he achieved the immortality he sought without the magic plant he lost. This message remains the most profound thing to emerge from ancient Mesopotamia, more significant than any technology that may or may not have been preserved in hidden tombs. The meaning of life is not in escaping death, but in creating something that death cannot destroy. Legacy outlasts biology. Story outlasts stone. The connection between human beings across time, through narrative and memory and shared wisdom, is the only immortality available to mortals. Gilgamesh discovered this truth and passed it down to us. Whether his physical tomb lies beneath an Iraqi riverbed, whether that tomb contains artifacts of extraordinary significance, whether powerful forces have conspired to keep those artifacts from public knowledge, all of these questions are secondary to the gift he already gave. The questions make for fascinating speculation. They touch on mysteries that may never be solved. But the epic itself is not a mystery. It is an inheritance that anyone can claim simply by reading the ancient words and letting them work their ancient magic. Iraq is not merely another country with an ancient past. It is the place where human civilization itself was invented. The first cities rose here, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The first writing systems were developed here to track commerce and record laws. The first schools taught here, training scribes who would preserve knowledge for future generations. The first mathematical calculations were performed here, using a base 60 system we still employ when measuring time and angles. What happened in ancient Mesopotamia shaped everything that came after. The philosophical implications of these observations extend far beyond any single site or discovery, to touch on fundamental questions about human civilization itself. The Sumerians who built Uruk and the other great cities of the region achieved things that continue to astonish researchers. They constructed massive ziggurats, stepped pyramids that dominated the landscape for miles around. They developed sophisticated irrigation systems that transformed harsh land into productive agriculture. They created bureaucracies that administered complex economies across vast territories. They observed the heavens with precision that would not be matched until the development of modern telescopes. How they accomplished all this in an era we consider prehistoric remains partially mysterious. The clay tablets they left behind number in the hundreds of thousands, most still unread and untranslated. They recorded everything: business transactions, legal disputes, medical treatments, religious ceremonies, astronomical observations, literary compositions. The Epic of Gilgamesh is only the most famous among countless texts that document a civilization of remarkable sophistication. Each tablet that was destroyed in the looting of 2003 may have contained information we will never recover. Insights into how these ancient people understood their world and their place within it. The Babylonians who succeeded the Sumerians built upon their foundations and reached new heights of cultural achievement. Hammurabi's law code established principles of justice that echo in modern legal systems. Babylonian astronomers tracked the movements of planets with accuracy that amazes contemporary scientists. The Hanging Gardens, if they existed, demonstrated engineering capabilities that seem improbable for the era. When Alexander the Great conquered the known world, he chose Babylon as his capital, recognizing its symbolic importance as the center of civilization itself. The Assyrians added military innovation to cultural inheritance, building an empire that controlled the ancient Near East through organization and force. Their libraries, particularly at Nineveh, preserved the literature of previous ages, including the tablets that would eventually reveal the Epic of Gilgamesh to modern readers. When those libraries burned, the fire baked the clay tablets and preserved them for millennia. Catastrophe became conservation through an accident of materials that the ancient scribes could never have anticipated or planned. All of this heritage concentrated in the region that would become modern Iraq. Layer upon layer of occupation, each generation building on the ruins of predecessors. The depth of archaeological deposits in some areas reaches dozens of meters, representing thousands of years of continuous human activity. Beneath the modern cities and war-scarred landscapes lie remains that have never been properly investigated. Every construction project potentially disturbs artifacts that would rewrite textbooks if properly excavated and studied. The decision to invade Iraq in 2003 was therefore not merely a geopolitical event, but a cultural watershed. Military operations took place in territories that contained irreplaceable evidence of human achievement. Bombs fell on landscapes where the foundations of civilization were laid. Tanks rolled through regions where writing was invented. Whatever the political justifications for the war, its cultural consequences were devastating to a heritage that belongs not just to Iraq, but to all humanity. Those who believe the invasion had hidden objectives related to archaeology point to this uniqueness as evidence for their theories. Of all the places on Earth where ancient sites might contain extraordinary secrets, Iraq is the most likely. The Sumerians appeared suddenly in the historical record with capabilities that suggest either rapid development or inheritance from elsewhere. Their own texts attribute their knowledge to beings from the sky. If any ancient civilization possessed advanced technology, the traces would most likely be found here, in the land where it all began. 20 years have passed since the German team announced their discovery beneath the ancient riverbed. In that time, technology has advanced remarkably. Ground-penetrating radar has become more precise. Satellite imagery can detect archaeological features invisible from the ground. DNA analysis can reveal information about ancient populations that bones alone could never provide. Artificial intelligence can accelerate the translation of tablets that have sat unread in museum collections for decades. Yet none of these tools have been applied to the supposed tomb of Gilgamesh. The site remains as inaccessible as it was during the worst years of conflict. Iraq has stabilized somewhat since the dark days of civil war and the Islamic State, but archaeological work requires long-term security that has not been established. Funding for excavation competes with reconstruction of basic infrastructure destroyed by years of violence. The priority of investigating an ancient tomb, however significant, ranks below the needs of living populations struggling to rebuild their lives. Meanwhile, the German team has aged. The researchers who conducted the original magnetometry survey are now decades older, their careers winding down. The knowledge they accumulated, the detailed data they collected, exists in archives and memories that become more fragile with each passing year. If they die without returning to complete their work, and without publishing the full results of their surveys, that knowledge may be lost along with them. The window for investigation narrows as time passes. The internet has transformed how stories like this one circulate and evolve. Communities of believers share information, theories, and supposed evidence across platforms that span the globe. Videos accumulate millions of views discussing ancient astronauts and hidden archaeology. Books continue to be published exploring alternative histories and conspiracy theories. The story of Gilgamesh's tomb has become woven into a larger narrative about concealed knowledge and elite manipulation that attracts devoted followings. Whether this attention helps or hinders genuine investigation is debatable. Popular interest can bring pressure to bear on institutions that might otherwise ignore important questions. It can also attract sensationalism that obscures serious inquiry beneath layers of unfounded speculation. The line between legitimate questions and baseless fantasy is often blurred in communities where everything is suspect and nothing is definitively proven. Skepticism toward authority can become credulous acceptance of any alternative narrative. Academic archaeology has largely ignored the story, treating it as one more conspiracy theory beneath serious notice. This dismissiveness may be intellectually justified, but it leaves the field to those less constrained by professional standards. The questions that mainstream scholars refuse to engage are answered instead by researchers whose methods and conclusions would not survive peer review. The vacuum created by official silence fills with alternatives that may mislead as often as they illuminate. The truth, as often happens, probably lies somewhere between the extremes of total dismissal and uncritical belief. The German team did detect something beneath that riverbed. The timing of the discovery and invasion was peculiar. The looting of the museum did show signs of coordination. These facts deserve acknowledgement, even if their interpretation remains contested. Dismissing all questions as conspiracy theory is as intellectually lazy as accepting every speculation as proven truth. The capacity to hold both positions in mind without forcing premature closure is itself a form of intellectual maturity that dogmatism in either direction cannot achieve. What the future holds for this mystery depends on factors beyond any individual's control. Political stability in Iraq, funding for archaeological research, the survival of relevant documents and witnesses, technological advances that might allow investigation without physical excavation, the emergence of whistleblowers who might reveal classified information. Any of these could shift the landscape overnight. Or the mystery could persist indefinitely, one more unanswered question in the vast catalog of things we do not know about our own history. There is a particular kind of discomfort that comes from not knowing something important. The mind reaches for resolution that cannot be found. Questions circle without answers. Speculation fills spaces that certainty cannot reach. This discomfort is the price of intellectual honesty when facing genuine mystery. Those who claim certain knowledge about Gilgamesh's tomb, whether affirming or denying the theories that surround it, have abandoned the humility that uncertainty demands. Those who insist on certainty before the evidence warrants it may feel more comfortable, but their comfort comes at the cost of accuracy and openness to truth. We live in an age that promises infinite information, but often delivers only infinite noise. Search engines return millions of results for any query, but cannot distinguish truth from fabrication. Social media amplifies voices without regard for accuracy. The democratization of publishing has made everyone a potential authority, while making genuine expertise harder to identify. In this environment, ancient mysteries flourish because the tools for evaluation have been overwhelmed by the volume of competing claims. Yet the desire to know remains fundamental to human nature. We are the species that asks questions, that cannot rest with unexplained phenomena, that builds entire civilizations around the pursuit of understanding. Gilgamesh himself was driven by this desire, pushing beyond the boundaries of the known world in search of answers that might explain his existence. The fact that he failed to find immortality does not diminish the nobility of his search. The fact that we may never know what lies in his tomb does not diminish the value of asking. Perhaps the mystery itself serves a purpose that resolution would undermine. As long as questions remain open, imagination has room to explore possibilities that definitive answers would foreclose. The unknown is a space of potential where the mind can wander freely. Certainty, whether of belief or skepticism, closes doors that uncertainty keeps open. The story of Gilgamesh's tomb may be more valuable as an invitation to wonder than it could ever be as a set of verified facts. What we cannot yet prove, we can still contemplate. What remains hidden from full view can still cast shadows that guide attention toward important questions. This is not an argument for abandoning inquiry or embracing willful ignorance. The questions deserve investigation, with whatever tools and access become available. The German team should return to the site when conditions permit. The classified documents should be declassified when security concerns no longer justify concealment. The truth, whatever it is, should eventually emerge into daylight, where it can be examined and understood. But until that day arrives, we can hold the questions with appreciation rather than frustration. The night is long and filled with mysteries far greater than any single tomb, however ancient and significant. The universe extends beyond comprehension in every direction. The nature of consciousness, the origin of life, the meaning of existence itself, all remain unexplained despite centuries of investigation by the finest minds humanity has produced. Against this backdrop of ultimate mystery, the question of what lies beneath an Iraqi riverbed is a small thing. Yet, small things matter. They are the threads we can actually grasp, while the larger mysteries remain forever beyond reach. Those who were present during the events of April 2003 tell stories that vary depending on their position and perspective. Coalition soldiers remember chaos, confusion, and orders that sometimes seem to make no sense. Iraqi civilians remember fear, loss, and the collapse of everything familiar. Museum staff remember the horror of watching their life's work being destroyed or stolen. Each group holds a piece of the truth that the official narrative has never fully integrated into a coherent whole. The soldiers who served in southern Iraq during the early days of the occupation have been notably reluctant to discuss certain aspects of their experience. Some cite ongoing security classifications that prohibit disclosure. Others simply avoid the subject when questioned, changing topics or offering only vague generalities. Whether this silence reflects genuine restrictions, traumatic memories better left undisturbed, or awareness of events that should not be publicly discussed, remains impossible to determine from outside. Iraqi archaeologists and museum professionals who survived the invasion have dispersed across the world. Some found positions at Western universities, where they continue their work with collections that had already left Iraq legally. Others work in private consulting or cultural heritage organizations. A few returned to Iraq when conditions permitted and struggle to preserve what remains. Their testimony about what happened in 2003 comes in fragments, interviews given reluctantly and often anonymously to journalists and researchers. One pattern that emerges from these scattered accounts is that the looting was not a single event, but multiple distinct operations occurring simultaneously or in sequence. The opportunistic theft by ordinary citizens breaking into the museum was real, but represented only one layer of what happened. Behind this visible chaos, more organized activity was taking place. Objects were being removed systematically, transported by vehicles that had authorization to move through military checkpoints, and taken to destinations that remain unknown. The testimony of Donnie George, who served as director of the Iraqi National Museum and later fled to the United States, has been particularly valuable. He spoke publicly about what was lost, what was recovered, and what questions remained unanswered. He described the desperation of museum staff trying to protect collections they knew were irreplaceable. He confirmed that some thefts showed clear signs of professional planning. Before his death in 2011, he had begun working on a comprehensive account that was never completed. Other witnesses have been less forthcoming or have died before their accounts could be properly recorded. The passage of time makes this silence increasingly permanent. Memories fade, documents are lost, and the people who could clarify what happened become fewer each year. The window for gathering testimony from those who were actually present during these events is closing. What is not documented now may never be recovered. The burden of knowledge that cannot be shared weighs heavily on those who carry it, affecting their behavior in ways that attentive observers can sometimes detect. The official investigations that followed produced reports that satisfied no one completely. They acknowledged failures in planning and execution. They assigned responsibility to various levels of command. They recommended reforms to prevent similar losses in future conflicts. But they did not explain the patterns that troubled careful observers. The targeted nature of certain thefts, the rapid securing of archaeological sites, the silence of scientists who should have been eager to discuss their discoveries. These gaps remain unfilled. For those who believe in hidden agendas, the silence of witnesses confirms their suspicions. People stay quiet because they have been told to stay quiet, because they fear consequences from revealing what they know. For skeptics, the silence proves nothing. People stay quiet for many reasons: professional caution, traumatic memory, simple lack of anything interesting to say. The interpretation one chooses reflects prior assumptions more than the evidence actually provided. This combination of fragmentary evidence and persistent gaps creates the perfect conditions for speculation to flourish where certainty cannot take root. The story of Gilgamesh's tomb has become part of a larger modern mythology about hidden history and suppressed knowledge. This mythology has its own sacred texts. The works of Sitchin, Hancock, von Daniken, and others who challenge conventional narratives. It has its own priesthood, researchers and presenters who guide believers through the mysteries. It has its own rituals, the watching of documentaries, the sharing of videos, the gathering in online communities to discuss new findings and interpretations. Whether this modern mythology contains truth or merely fulfills psychological needs that traditional religions once served, is a question worth considering. The appeal of hidden knowledge, of secrets that explain the visible world, is ancient and powerful. Mystery religions thrived in the ancient world by promising initiates access to truths concealed from ordinary people. Gnostic traditions taught that the visible world was a prison, and true freedom came from secret understanding. These patterns repeat in contemporary alternative history communities. The Internet has accelerated the spread of these beliefs in ways that previous generations of mystery seekers could not have imagined. A video about ancient astronauts can reach millions of viewers within days. Communities form around specific theories, reinforcing shared beliefs and dismissing contradictory evidence. Algorithms serve content that confirms existing interests, creating feedback loops that intensify conviction. What was once a marginal subculture has become a significant presence in popular consciousness. The mainstream response to this phenomenon has generally been dismissive, Scientists and historians point to the lack of peer-reviewed evidence. They note the cherry-picking of data that supports desired conclusions, while ignoring contradictory findings. They criticize the logical fallacies and methodological failures that characterize much alternative research. This criticism is largely justified on intellectual grounds, but it has done little to diminish the appeal of the beliefs it targets. The question of what constitutes legitimate inquiry versus irresponsible speculation remains contested at the boundaries where mainstream scholarship ends and alternative research begins. Perhaps the criticism fails because it addresses the wrong need. People do not believe in ancient astronauts or hidden tombs, primarily because the evidence compels them. They believe because the beliefs serve functions that conventional narratives do not. They offer meaning, mystery, and the sense of participating in something larger than ordinary existence. They create communities of shared understanding in a fragmented world. They provide explanations for a reality that often seems inexplicable through normal channels. The story of Gilgamesh's tomb fits perfectly into this larger mythology. An ancient king of divine ancestry. A tomb that might contain extraordinary secrets. A discovery announced and then suppressed. Powerful forces working to keep the truth hidden. All the elements of a classic mystery narrative are present, ready to be integrated into whatever framework the believer already accepts. The story is compelling precisely because it can mean whatever the hearer wants it to mean. These dynamics shape how controversial ideas spread through modern societies, challenging traditional gatekeepers of knowledge while creating new vulnerabilities to misinformation. This does not mean the story is false. The German team really did detect something beneath that riverbed. The timing of the discovery and invasion really was peculiar. The looting really did show signs of organization. These facts exist independently of the mythology that has grown around them. The challenge is to engage with the facts honestly, without either dismissing them as conspiracy fantasy or accepting every speculation as proven truth. The emotional resonance of these beliefs often proves more powerful than rational argument in determining what people accept as true about the hidden dimensions of history. The night offers no easy resolution to this tension. Both excessive skepticism and excessive credulity lead away from truth. The honest position acknowledges uncertainty while remaining open to evidence. It holds questions without forcing premature answers. It recognizes that we may never know what lies beneath that ancient riverbed, that some mysteries persist because the information needed to resolve them has been lost or deliberately concealed. This is not comfortable. But comfort is not the goal of genuine inquiry. The questions we have explored tonight will still be there tomorrow. The mystery of Gilgamesh's tomb is not going anywhere. Whatever lies beneath that ancient riverbed has waited 5,000 years already. It can wait through one more night of your dreaming. Let the urgency of unanswered questions dissolve as the need for sleep grows stronger. There is wisdom in knowing when to rest, even from the most fascinating puzzles. The relationship between evidence and belief operates differently in these communities than in academic contexts, with different standards for what counts as proof. Gilgamesh himself learned this lesson on his journey. After crossing mountains and walking through darkness, after reaching the end of the world and learning the truth about immortality, he had to return home. The quest ended not in triumph, but in transformation. He came back to Uruk not with the prize he sought, but with wisdom that served him better. Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination. Sometimes what we learn along the way exceeds what we hope to find. This observation does not invalidate the underlying questions, but rather highlights the complexity of evaluating claims that resist conventional methods of verification. The ancient Mesopotamians believed that sleep was a kind of small death, a nightly journey to realms that waking consciousness could not access. Dreams came from the gods, bringing messages that required interpretation by skilled priests. The boundary between sleep and death was thin, and both offered access to truths hidden from ordinary awareness. When you close your eyes tonight, you follow a path that billions of humans have walked before you, stretching back to the very beginnings of our kind. The stars that shine tonight are the same stars that shone over Uruk when Gilgamesh walked its streets. The constellations the Sumerian priests named still wheel across the heavens in their ancient patterns. Time flows differently for stars than for humans. What seems like history to us is merely a moment in their burning. Perhaps they remember what we have forgotten. Perhaps in their light, secrets persist that earthly records have lost. The transition from waking attention to sleeping consciousness involves processes that remain mysterious, even to neuroscientists who study them with modern instruments. Let your thoughts drift now, like clouds across the moon. The questions about tunes and conspiracies and hidden knowledge can settle into the background of awareness, present but not demanding. The night has room for all of them without requiring resolution. Sleep is not an escape from mystery, but an embrace of it. In dreams, the rules of waking logic relax, and possibilities expand beyond what daylight permits. This ancient understanding of sleep as a portal to other dimensions of experience resonates with contemporary research into the functions of dreaming and the architecture of sleep cycles. Somewhere in southern Iraq, beneath sand that has accumulated over millennia, beneath a river that may have shifted course a dozen times since the city of Uruk flourished, something waits. A chamber, a tomb, artifacts that might tell us things we have forgotten about ourselves. Or perhaps nothing at all, just another ruin among the countless ruins that mark the passage of civilizations across that ancient land. We do not know. Tonight, we do not need to know. The continuity of these celestial patterns across human history provides a kind of stability that earthly affairs, with all their chaos and change, cannot match. The Epic of Gilgamesh ends with the king returned to his city, looking at the walls he built with new appreciation. He has traveled farther than any human before him. He has spoken with immortals and held the plant of eternal youth in his hands. He has lost everything he sought and gained something he could not have anticipated. He is home. The walls are strong. The story has been written. That is enough. That has always been enough. The physics of light traveling across vast distances means that when we see stars, we see the past itself. Photons that began their journey long before human history began. Let that be enough for tonight as well. The mystery endures, the questions persist, but sleep calls, and the body requires rest that speculation cannot provide. The morning will bring new light and perhaps new perspectives. Until then, let the ancient king rest in whatever chamber awaits him, undisturbed by our wondering. Let the secrets keep themselves for one more night. And let your breathing slow as the darkness gathers you gently into dreams. This acceptance of not knowing is not resignation, but rather a mature relationship with mystery that allows wonder to coexist with rigorous inquiry. The weight of 5,000 years presses down on anyone who seriously considers what Gilgamesh might represent. 5,000 years ago, the pyramids had not yet been built. Writing had just been invented. Humans were taking their first steps toward the complex civilizations that would eventually span the globe. Whatever Gilgamesh was, whatever he achieved, whatever was buried with him, comes from a time so distant that our minds struggle to truly comprehend the gap. Yet the story survives, bridge across an abyss of time. Every generation that retold the epic added something and lost something. The story passed from Sumerian to Akkadian to other languages now extinct. Scribes copied tablets, making errors and corrections, interpreting obscure passages according to their own understanding. What we have today is the result of thousands of years of transmission through cultures radically different from our own. The Gilgamesh we read about may differ substantially from the Gilgamesh who actually lived, if he actually lived at all. Yet certain elements persist through all the variations. The friendship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the grief at Enkidu's death, the desperate search for immortality, the failure to escape human fate, the return home with wisdom rather than eternal life. These core elements survived because they touched something universal in human experience, something that resonated with listeners whether they lived in ancient Uruk or modern cities around the world. The details may change, but the emotional truth remains. The possible discovery of Gilgamesh's actual tomb in 2003 threatened to transform legend into fact in ways that might have been uncomfortable for everyone. Believers in ancient astronauts hoped to find evidence of extraterrestrial technology. Religious traditionalists worried about challenges to Scripture. Mainstream historians feared the circus that would surround any spectacular discovery. Everyone had reasons to either desire or dread whatever might emerge from that riverbed, which may help explain why no one has made serious efforts to excavate. The tomb, if it exists, has become a kind of Rorschach test for contemporary attitudes toward the ancient past. What people expect to find reflects what they already believe about human origins and capabilities. Those who see ancient civilizations as primitive assume the tomb would contain only ordinary grave goods. Those who believe in lost, advanced cultures expect technological artifacts. Those who suspect elite conspiracies assume evidence is being suppressed. The actual contents, whatever they are, remain hidden behind projection. Perhaps this ambiguity is appropriate for a figure who was himself ambiguous, neither fully God nor fully human, neither purely historical nor purely legendary, neither immortal nor ordinary in his mortality. Gilgamesh occupies a liminal space between categories, and his tomb, whether real or imagined, occupies a similar space. It is simultaneously possible and unproven, significant and uncertain, present and inaccessible. Like so much else about the ancient world, it hovers at the edge of what we can know, inviting speculation while resisting confirmation. As this night deepens and your awareness begins its descent toward sleep, consider the profound silence that surrounds this entire mystery. The German archaeologists have not spoken publicly in years. The Iraqi scientists who knew most are scattered or dead. The military personnel who served in southern Iraq have mostly moved on with their lives, their memories fading. The documents that might clarify what happened remain classified, if they exist at all. Into this silence, stories and speculation flow like water, filling empty spaces. The silence is itself a kind of testimony. When people with knowledge refuse to speak, their refusal communicates something, even if we cannot determine exactly what. Perhaps they are bound by agreements they cannot break. Perhaps they fear consequences they cannot specify. Perhaps they simply have nothing to add to what is already known. Or perhaps the silence is just silence, the absence of information rather than its concealment. We cannot know from outside what the silence means. The psychology of silence in the face of potential revelation tells us something about the pressures that bear upon those who possess sensitive information in our current world. Future historians will look back at this period and wonder what we knew, what we suspected, and what we chose not to pursue. They will have access to documents we cannot see and perspectives we cannot achieve. Perhaps they will laugh at our conspiracy theories as naive fantasies. Perhaps they will wonder how we missed obvious signs of something extraordinary. The judgment of the future is always uncertain, its verdicts delivered too late for those who must act in the present. The irony of seeking ancient wisdom while creating conditions that destroy its sources may be recognized only when it is far too late to reverse the damage done. For now, the story remains suspended between revelation and obscurity. The tomb may be real or imagined. The conspiracy may be fact or fantasy. The truth may emerge tomorrow or remain hidden forever. We live with uncertainty as the only certain thing, which is perhaps appropriate for a mystery that stretches back 5 millennia. Gilgamesh himself learned to live with uncertainty after his quest failed. Perhaps we can learn the same lesson from his ancient example, as the night gathers us toward rest. As the night deepens, let these questions settle gently in your mind, without demanding immediate resolution. The mystery of Gilgamesh's tomb has waited 5,000 years. It can wait a little longer. What matters now is not finding answers, but sitting with the wonder that such questions exist at all. The past is deeper than we know. The present is stranger than we admit. And the future will reveal what we cannot yet imagine. Difficult questions sometimes point toward important realities that comfortable certainty would prefer to ignore. Think of Gilgamesh himself, that ancient king who feared death so much that he traveled to the edge of the world seeking escape. He did not find immortality. He found something perhaps more valuable, the understanding that legacy matters more than longevity. The walls he built are mostly ruins now, but the story he left behind has survived millennia, touching countless minds with its wisdom. In a sense, he achieved what he sought. The period of his kingship saw humanity cross thresholds that would determine the direction of all future development. We are all searching for something, meaning, purpose, connection to something larger than our brief individual lives. The appeal of ancient mysteries lies partly in this search. When we wonder about lost civilizations and hidden knowledge, we are really wondering about ourselves. Who are we? Where did we come from? Is there more to human history than we have been told? These questions are worth asking even if the answers remain elusive. What is hidden invites conjecture, and conjecture unchecked by revelation can expand without limit. The destruction of Iraqi cultural heritage is a genuine tragedy, regardless of what one believes about conspiracies or cover-ups. Those artifacts, those sites, those tablets inscribed with the first written words belonged to all of us. They were evidence of our shared human story, the record of our ancestors' struggles and achievements. What was lost cannot be recovered. What remains is precious and precarious. We owe it to future generations to protect what survived. These ancient records, baked in the fires that destroyed their libraries, had survived millennia only to face new threats in the chaos of modern warfare. The night wraps around you now like the ancient sands that cover forgotten tombs. Somewhere in southern Iraq, beneath a river that has flowed for countless centuries, something waits. A chamber, perhaps, a burial site. Artifacts that might tell us things we have forgotten about our own origins. Or perhaps nothing more than the romantic imagination of those who prefer mystery to mundane reality. Either way, the question itself is beautiful. Such questions deserve careful consideration rather than dismissal, for even uncomfortable inquiries can lead to deeper understanding. Let your thoughts drift now toward the edges of consciousness. The boundary between waking and sleeping is itself a kind of mystery. Every night we pass through a door into another realm, a place of dreams and deeper awareness. Gilgamesh walked through darkness for 12 hours to reach the land of the immortals. We make a similar journey each time we close our eyes and let the night take us. The juxtaposition of these moments continues to trouble observers who find the official narrative incomplete. The stars that watched over Uruk 5,000 years ago are still burning tonight. The same constellations that Sumerian priests studied, that the Anunnaki supposedly descended from, that Gilgamesh sailed beneath on his journey to the edge of the world. Time passes differently for stars. What seems ancient to us is merely a moment in their burning. Perhaps they remember what we have forgotten. Whether these beings were divine in the spiritual sense, or something else entirely, remains the central question dividing those who study these ancient texts. Somewhere, the truth of what happened in April 2003 exists, in classified documents, in the memories of those who were there, in the ground itself waiting to be excavated. Perhaps it will emerge someday when circumstances change, when new technologies allow investigation, when the political obstacles dissolve. Perhaps it will remain hidden forever, one more mystery among the countless mysteries that human history contains. Silence from authorities generates questions that multiply in the darkness where answers should be. But tonight, let it rest. Let the questions float like dust in moonlight, present but not demanding attention. The ancient king who sought immortality found peace at last in Uruk, ruling wisely until his time came. We too can find peace in not knowing, in accepting that some things are beyond our reach. The mystery endures. That is enough. Tomorrow the questions will still be there. Tonight is for dreaming. In his search, Gilgamesh gave voice to yearnings that remain as powerful today as they were 5 millennia ago. Good night. Sleep well. Let the mystery of Gilgamesh's tomb accompany you into rest. Perhaps in dreams you will walk those ancient streets, see those towering walls, meet the king himself still searching after all these ages for what he could never quite find. Or perhaps your sleep will be empty and peaceful, a rest from questions that have no answers. Either way, the morning will come, and the story will continue as it has for 5,000 years, patient and eternal. His age was one of transition, when scattered settlements were becoming the great cities that anchor human memory.